62 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Agriculture and Agri-Food. I'll start with just a few reminders. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format. The proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website. And just so you're aware, the webcast will always show the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee. Colleagues, it's great to be back. I apologize that I have to be virtually this evening. Unfortunately, family matters require me to be at home, but I'm looking forward to what will be a really important discussion. Just want to recognize that Mr. Savard Tremblay is substituting for Mr. Parent, and we're going to have Mr. Epp in for Mr. Barlow for the first hour. So welcome to you both. Pursuant to Standing Order 108-2 and the motion adopted by the committee on Monday, April 24th, 2023, the committee is commencing its study of the closure of the Olymel processing plant in Valley-Jonction. I would now like to welcome our witnesses for the first 1 hour panel. From the Department of Agriculture and Agri-Food, Donald Boucher, Director General, Sector Development and NLS Directorate. From the Department of Citizenship and Immigration, Tal El-Harar, who is the Senior Director, and Ian Gillespie, Director of Temporary Resident Policy and Regulations. From the Department of Employment and Social Development, Jacine David, and from Olymel, we have Paul Beauchamp, who is the first Vice President, and Louis Banville, who is Vice President, Human Resources. And from Solio Cooperative Group, we have Stéphane Forger, Senior Vice President, Public Affairs, Corporation, and Corporate Responsibility. We're going to have a 5-minute opening statement from each organization with the exception of ESDC. So it will be 20 minutes, and we'll try to do our best to get 2 rounds of questionings in. So I'm going to start with the Department of Agriculture and Agri-Food for up to 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Au nom du ministère de l'Agriculture et de l'Agroalimentaire du Canada, merci.
In the name of the Department of Agriculture and Agri-Food of Canada, we would like to thank the committee for allowing us to express our views on the closure of the Olymel slaughterhouse in Valley-Jonction. First of all, I would like to mention that AAFC is committed to listening to the needs of the industry and works closely within its mandate with the agriculture and agri-food sector and businesses while respecting their business decisions. As a result, AAFC is well aware of the challenging environment that pork industry has faced in recent years. Hog producers are struggling with rising feed costs, fuel costs, and interest rates. Also, it is important to remember that the pork industry has been through several years of turmoil with the COVID-19 pandemic, the pending hog situation, various strikes throughout the supply chain, the devaluation of the yen, which negatively affected pork sales in Japan, to name a few factors. However, the outlook for the meat industry in Canada is largely dependent on these markets. In a context where China, the world's largest consumer of pork, is rebuilding its herd, which was decimated by African swine fever. In order to remain competitive in the world markets, the Canadian pork industry must be able to adjust quickly to the many unpredictable market access issues that will arise. As the world's population increases, the demand for animal protein will remain strong. The pork industry is a major player in the Canadian agricultural sector, having generated more than $6.5 billion in farm gate revenues and accounting for more than 35% of the hogs produced in Quebec. In this context, it is easy to understand the importance of Olymel, which is the largest processor in Quebec, accounting for about 3/4 of the province's slaughterings. It is therefore an important company in the sector with which AAFC collaborates on a regular basis, whether through ongoing work on African swine fever preparedness or through AAFC's sectoral engagement table on or roundtable on animal protein. As well, our officials have maintained regular contact with representatives of the Quebec pork industry following the mid-April announcement of the closure of the Valley-Jonction slaughterhouse. The labor shortage was cited by the company as the reason for the decision. More generally, the lack of manpower is a problem that exists in many companies in the agri-food sector and particularly in the meat production sector. In 2022, there will be over 2,100 vacancies in the meat slaughter and cutting sector. To this end, we are working closely with Employment and Social Development Canada and Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada to ensure that the Temporary Foreign Worker Program is responsive to the needs of the agriculture and agri-food sector. I will let my colleagues explain their efforts in this regard. AAFC is also developing a strategy to address chronic labor shortages in agriculture and food processing. Public consultations have been held, and focused dialogue with employers, unions, and underrepresented groups, as well as collaboration with the provinces and territories, is underway. In addition, we are working closely with the Canadian Agricultural Human Resource Council in the development of their labour force policy framework to ensure that our respective initiatives are complementary. The closure of the Chinese market in the 2020 to 2022 period, also cited as a reason for Olimel's difficulties, has affected several Canadian slaughterhouses, including the one in Vallée-Jonction. This closure was linked to China's requirements regarding COVID-19, and as a result, more than half of the country's hog slaughter capacity could no longer be sold on the Chinese market. As a result, Canadian government officials quickly intervened to request that the suspension of the affected plants be lifted and to seek clarification of China's requirements. Although export permits to China have since been reinstated, there is no doubt that these measures had a negative impact on the pork industry. All in all, our actions are consistent with our role in providing services to the industry and the marketplace. Given the importance of Olimel in Quebec and the place of the pork industry in our economy, the department is giving great consideration to the difficulties of this company. AAFC is always aware of the impact of this decision on producers, workers, and rural communities. Quebec's pork production is different from that of other Canadian provinces in that it is marketed according to a joint plan negotiated between producers and processors. This model is based on the cooperation of all the links in the chain and provides greater resilience in the face of obstacles. That said, AAFC will continue to work with all industry stakeholders to mitigate the impacts of this closure. AAFC offers a wide range of support programs to the hog industry. Thank you again for your attention to this important issue, and I would be pleased to answer any questions you may have.
We'll now turn to the Department of Immigration and Refugee Citizenship and Immigration, please.
Thank you, Chair and committee members. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we are on the traditional and ceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. Temporary foreign workers complement Canada's efforts to build domestic labour capacity and represent an important contributor to Canada's prosperity and economic growth. Les programmes du Canada à l'intention des travailleurs temporaires sont axés sur la demande et ne
There are no limits with regards to the licenses that can be delivered, which allows us to be flexible with regards to the evolution of the job market, meeting the expectations of the employees.
Workers can obtain work permits through two programs. First, the Temporary Foreign Worker Program, which relies on a labour market impact assessment that helps ensure that the hiring of temporary foreign workers will not adversely affect the Canadian labour market. The other way is the International Mobility Program, which is exempt from the labour market impact assessment and enables the entry of foreign nationals to work in support of broader social, cultural, and economic interests, or where there are reciprocal opportunities for Canadians. Both programs feature conditions and requirements on employers to help ensure the protection of workers while they are here. The Government of Canada is committed to helping foreign workers who may have lost their employment due to the olive mill factory closure in Vallée-Jonction. Workers who find themselves in a similar position can benefit from a number of recently introduced facilitative measures. Since May 2020, workers and prospective employers can leverage the Changing Employers Public Policy, which expedites work permit processing for foreign nationals already in Canada with work permits to change employers, for example if they have been laid off, and begin working for their new employer while awaiting for their new work permit. Employers and workers alike can also benefit from the Workforce Solutions Roadmap under the Temporary Foreign Worker Program, which was recently extended until the end of October 2023. The roadmap enables employers in 7 sectors with demonstrated labour shortages, including food manufacturing, to hire up to 30% of their workforce through the Temporary Foreign Worker Program for low-wage positions. If it extended the validity of labour market impact assessments, the time they can be used to support a work permit application, to 18 months from 9, and maintained the maximum duration of employment for low-wage positions at 2 years, a measure originally introduced during the pandemic. Dans le cadre du budget de 2020,
Budget 2022 announced additional measures, including introducing a recognized employer pilot plan that will aim to reduce red tape for select repeat employers who meet exceptionally high standards, implementing a new foreign labor program for agriculture and fish processing, increasing capacity to process employer applications, and improving the quality of employer inspections. ESDC has since improved processing times, with an average of 30 days for a LMIA decision to be issued at the beginning of April 2023 through a number of modernization initiatives, including a complete transition to an online solution.
De travailler avec l'employeur
of Canada is aware that Olymel will be closing its Vallée Jonction facility and continues to work with the employer to explore options to facilitate the transfer of impacted temporary foreign workers to other Olymel facilities in the province of Quebec. New LMIAs, or previously approved LMIAs, will need to be leveraged should workers wish to be transferred to another plant, as these new work locations are not located in the same economic region.
To relocate will ultimately come down to Olymel and the workers themselves. Both IRCC and ESDC are committed to facilitating this process and working with the province of Quebec to ensure a smooth transition. Both departments are also working with Olymel to facilitate the extension of LMIAs and work permits to ensure that the Vallée Jonction plant is fully staffed until the day it closes. In closing, I'll simply note that IRCC and ESDC will continue to work with employers and workers to ensure they have support and protection they need to help our economy grow. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Maintenant, nous avons
Thank you, Mr. Forget or Mr. Blainville for Olymel. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you to all of the members. First, a few words on Olymel. It is the biggest meat processor in the country. We process pork and poultry. Our factories are in 5 provinces in Canada, in New Brunswick, Quebec, Ontario, in Alberta, and we have farms in Saskatchewan. As main producer and processor of pork, we are very important to the Quebec economy, but also to the Canadian economy. However, if we consider this globally, since it was referred to earlier, our market is not Canada, it is the world. Olymel's size is then looks quite small. Of course, we are competitive. We are competing against much bigger companies. Our $4.5 billion industry or operating fees is small compared to others. These sectors have had fantastic results. They have allowed us to manage the situation in the past years. The fresh pork was what helped us most get through it. We did lose more than $400 million over the last 2 years, and that is linked to our activities on the international market. We find ourselves in a situation where we had choices to make. Either we had to review our business plan or die with it. We decided to review it and maybe reduce our volume to ensure that we could continue to work and perhaps have a better future, rather than see this important producer be subjected to international market whims. Of course, the international market has been shaken up, a little bit less than Canada with regards to the labor shortage. But the labor shortage, of course, was impacted by our inability to match China. Of course, this made it impossible for us to produce added value products for Canadians. We slaughtered animals in order to prevent labor losses. This is part of what created the problem, which led us to reviewing our business plan. We tried to slaughter the same amount of animals without any changes, and we did this exercise. We took into consideration many factors: labor availabilities, regionality, working with various agencies to find employees, meeting the environmental requirements. And when we finished this exercise, we realized that the factory in Vallée-Jonction was, in fact, the most difficult to keep running. This factory is in a very important factory in Quebec, but we only had one factory that we could close. So out of the 4 places that we operate, there had to be a closure. I would like to reassure members of the committee that there were very exhaustive analyses, and it was done without bias, and it was taken very seriously. We really tried to ensure that the decision was best for the industry. Choosing this factory was not done because we were negotiating pork with the pork farmers in Quebec, but we instead took into consideration what was going to happen with regards to sales. With hog breeders, we tried to minimize the impact on production and on the producers in Vallée-Jonction. I know that one of the members who is participating in this exercise is here today. We will, of course, collaborate with the state in order to replace the most workers as we can, whether they are temporary foreign workers or if they are already living in our communities. We will try to replace the largest amount as possible, but we are still able to receive 1,200 temporary foreign workers. That means that despite all of the efforts, there is still a huge labor shortage and we hope to be able to rectify that over the next few years. So yes, indeed, in our other factories, we do have other openings. Thank you, Mr. Beauchamp. Your time has run out. And now on to Mr. Forger. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. Maybe just a reminder, Solio Cooperative Group has existed for more than 100 years, and it is the only Canada-wide agricultural supply cooperative with roots in Quebec. We represent more than 123,000 members, agricultural producers, and consumers in 43 traditional and consumer agricultural cooperatives. We have more than 15,000 employees in our 3 divisions. BMR, Quebec's leading retailer for building materials and hardware, Solio Agriculture, which supplies farms, and Olimel, which, as Mr. Beauchamp explained, specializes in pork and poultry processing. Our agricultural cooperatives are corporations freely formed by agricultural producers to supply their operations, improve production conditions, and facilitate the sale of products, in particular by extending the value chain. As such, and as mentioned by some of you, Olimel plays an important role in the Canadian agri-food ecosystem and makes a significant contribution to the cooperatives in our network and all stakeholders in the pork industry, especially the hog producers who are members of our network and the pork division of our cooperative. Also, you should know we have always aimed to offer quality pork products at competitive prices to customers here and around the world, and to generate enough wealth for all links in the chain. Our presence today can certainly be explained by the fact that the Quebec pork industry, which is the second most important production sector after the dairy industry and the first in terms of exports, is facing the most dire economic situation in its history. On one hand, processors must try to hold their own in a market where there is overproduction and where the price of pork has not kept pace with inflation like comparable commodities. On the other hand, there are producers who are struggling to make ends meet with rising grain prices, given that 65% of the cost of raising a hog is its feed. Coupled with this are the rising interest rates that are dealing a blow to those who have made substantial investments to update their facilities, especially when it comes to ensuring animal welfare. Olimel is not happy about having to make such a bold decision to ensure its profitability and its ability to play an active role in the value chain. That said, we firmly believe the pork industry plays an important role in the economy and vitality of our regions, and that it is important to invest in and support the industry's stakeholders. We must now send a message of hope to the producers who represent the industry's future, because the situation of independent producers is cause for concern. I therefore encourage the committee to consider creating an assistance program to compensate affected producers. To do so, they can look to two earlier federal government initiatives between 2009 and 2014. The Hog Farm Transition Program, HFTP, or the Hog Industry Loan Loss Reserve Program, HILLRP. This is a concrete way, with support from provincial governments, to help the hog industry weather the current crisis and even emerge stronger. Lastly, the labor challenges continue, and the contribution of immigrant workers is significant, if not essential, to meeting our needs. We hope we can count on your collaboration as a committee to ensure that those who wish to work in this industry can contribute fully. We must continue to enhance the value of careers in the essential sector that is agri-food. Thank you for your invitation, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Mr. Forget. Now, I would like to just say for Mr. Lehoux, in particular, in the name of the committee, we see the impact on workers and farmers in Beauce, and this is why our committee has decided to have this study. So, Mr. Lehoux, 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for allowing this study tonight. Welcome to all of our witnesses tonight. First question, very quickly, for Mr. Beauchamp. The workers in Vallée-Jonction spoke to me at my office, Is there any possibility for them to be transferred into other industries and letting them go to other industries in both? Just simply yes or no. The answer does not depend on Olimel. It also hinges on federal authorities. We have collaborated with them so that those who wish to stay in the region can do so, even though there might be interest to welcome them elsewhere. I spoke with Minister Fraser last week, and there seemed to be some willingness on their end in order to facilitate that process. Another question for you. The Chinese market is a very important market. I will ask this question to the agricultural minister as well, but is there a possibility of developing the market? There is 30% of production in my region, so it might be relevant to have other possibilities. It will be interesting, of course, to look into the programs that can help producers navigate this crisis. But are there other openings for the market? Yes, we work on this daily. The idea to reduce our input on the export market is because it's very volatile. With China, we were able to export to China, especially with sub-products. Of course, we need new markets for meat now. When I speak of volatility, you'll notice that many countries have reduced their production, including the United States. They have major companies that announced closures. This is not a problem that belongs only to Olimel, but it's an industry-wide problem and a global problem. Thank you very much. With regards to the Agriculture Minister Department, you have been working on opening markets elsewhere. What have you been doing? Are there any possible openings? Thank you for the question. Indeed, we are working on that through our secretariat. There are also some programs that are in place. The hog industry has received some funds in order to maintain access to various international markets. Thank you, because as we know, 70% of our production is made for exports. So we can, of course, reduce production, but of course, when we look at food security worldwide, there's that to take into consideration. I understand that there is willingness to open up the possibility of foreign temporary workers to stay here. Some of them have not been here all that long. They've been here for maybe a year. Is there any process to speed up this process? You did mention that there is a possibility to stay until September 2023, but the plant will be closing in December 2023. So is there anything in place for these people specifically? As I mentioned, at IRCC and ESDC, we work with Olimel for the issuing of work permits. We are working on extending the period where these workers can stay here so that they can stay until the plant closes. About 40 workers who have still not arrived in Canada, they sent me an email this morning. They have a contract with Olimel. They are concerned because they haven't started working yet. Will they have to start the process all over again? Or will the Department of Agriculture, or Immigration rather, help them? There are people coming in from Senegal and Tunisia. So will there be a faster process? Because they were meant to come to Vallée Jonction. If they want to go to another employer in the same region, they will sadly have to start the process over again for that company. However, right now, since the plant will be open until December, if they come during the next 6 months, they can come and then change employers at that time. So it really depends on when they want to come here to see if they can actually switch over quickly or not. Mr. Liu, sadly, your time is up. You only have 5 seconds left. Now, Ms. Taylor-Roy for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much to the witnesses who are here virtually and in person. I'd like to begin by just expressing my condolences for the people in this region. The member opposite has described the disruption and the distress caused by such a plant closure. And to say, you know, as members of the Agriculture Committee, we're very supportive of our farmers and realize that transitions such like this are very difficult. So thank you to the government officials for the work you do to try and make this transition easier. And the member opposite has been speaking about individual cases and temporary foreign workers. And it's something that we deal with in our office in a different way on a constituency basis, often dealing with immigration. And so I'd kind of like to back up a little bit to the bigger picture of what's happening here in Canada with the pork industry. And I'm wondering, you know, first perhaps to actually Mr. Forget, do you think this is a short-term issue because of the difficulties during the COVID pandemic and supply chain issues, or do you think we're seeing a transition in global demand, perhaps due to many issues, but including a transition to plant-based food, animal welfare concerns, and shifting consumer preferences? Because that obviously has implications for how we deal with this kind of a closure. Mr. Forget?
Oui.
Merci.
Alors,
Maybe I can start with an answer and then let Mr. Beauchamp from Aliumel complete the answer because he's a better expert than I am. At Solio, the pork industry is very important and we continue to invest in this industry. But this is a perfect storm. It is a global context that has become increasingly difficult. The closure at Vallée Jonction is certainly a consequence of this global volatility rather than just an independent phenomenon. So I will maybe let Mr. Beauchamp fill in the blanks if you agree, Mr. Chair. The industry, the swine industry, is a cyclical one. We are now at a lower ebb. We've talked about shortage. The pandemic has made recruiting very difficult, and it prevented us from minimizing the impact of these caused by these changes. Industry has not, the Aliumel has not decided to leave this industry, but to put our focus on a different area. We want to either go into processed meat products or added value products towards Japan or Korea, or with fresh meat products locally. So we are just focusing differently and pulling back a little bit, but we will continue to play a very important role in our industry and in Canada. We are choosing to protect ourselves from this horrible cycle.
Yeah, thank you very much, and I appreciate that you're focusing on higher value items in the local market. I'm wondering, too, whether, to some of the officials, whether you had received any requests from Aliumel for assistance or for any programs to help with the situation at Vallée Jonction, or was there any kind of formal request before they made the decision to close this plant?
So yes, the company reached out to us a few days before the public announcement without knowing the location to seek our assistance in terms of what we could do to work together to find other opportunities for the TFWs, either in Quebec or elsewhere. So yes.
Thank you. And that was for once it seemed they had made the decision to close the plant. They sought assistance in relocating some of the workers, which is excellent. I'm wondering, before they made the decision to close the plant, did they reach out to you, for example, to discuss what supports could be put in place to keep the plant operating?
Sorry, is this on? Yeah. Okay. So in fact, there has been no official request made to AAFC prior to that decision being made by the company.
Thank you. So it seems the decision was made obviously for global reasons, and there wasn't much the government could do to maintain this. So what role then, we're sitting here at Agriculture and Agri-Foods Committee, and I'm just wondering, as we're here discussing this, what role then do you see, or how the government could have prevented this somehow, or I'm just trying to comprehend what the discussion is about here and why we're discussing this here. If they did not make a formal request, if this is due to global markets and it's a corporate decision to focus on fresh meats locally and then value-added products for the export market, do you see there is something that the government could have, should have, would have done differently that could have affected this decision?
C'est malheureux, c'est temps, mais je vais.
I'm very sorry, but your time is up. However, I will allow for a very short answer.
I think from an AFC's perspective, the support that we've been providing is mostly looking at the hog industry altogether, looking at things like public trust, sustainability, innovation, and how to make the industry more resilient and more competitive. Working on market access, obviously, there's been a lot of work that continues to happen by our officials who are posted abroad, also here. So I think this is how we are trying to look at the supply chain and look at the industry in a holistic fashion.
Thank you, and thank you for all the witnesses for their answers.
Maintenant,
Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Savard-Tremblay for 6 minutes. Thank you very much to this committee for welcoming me once again. My questions will be for Mr. El-Harar and Mr. Gillespie. I hope I pronounced your names correctly. Very specific question for you. There are very many temporary foreign workers who will be jobless after the closure because they have a closed work permit. This is not a situation that is unique to Olamel. We have heard this happening elsewhere, that some temporary foreign workers negotiate a new contract elsewhere before the end of their work permit. However, sometimes they find themselves in limbo and unable to work for a few months, and they work on the black market in order to provide for their families. So what can the workers do? We are often called upon as MPs to answer these kinds of questions. We are told that there is nothing to do, but what can workers do when they find themselves in this situation?
So I think I'll just start by saying that all foreign nationals who are in Canada on work permits do have the right, the authority or ability to apply for a new work permit. And that's enshrined in the Immigration and Refugee Protection Regulations. In order to do so, they require, well, there's a number of criteria. It can include a labour market impact assessment, which would come from Employment and Social Development Canada, or otherwise if they meet one or the criteria of one or of many pathways under the International Mobility Program. So ultimately, those workers, if they were laid off or whatever, and they were on closed work permits, again, they could pursue other job opportunities. It would just depend on the employer and the situation, and they could apply for a new work permit.
Mais qu'est-ce qui se passe durant les délais de traitement?
And what about the processing delays? As I mentioned in my opening remarks, we have program that allows them to switch over from one to the other. So if they have a new job offer, they can submit a request to IRCC and start working for the new employer within 2 weeks. Thank you. Next question is for Olimel. Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagotte is my riding. I feel like I'm in some very sad movie that I've already been in because there has already been a closure in Saint-Hyacinthe. There are some of the reasons, for example, the labor shortage, which comes up over and over again. Are there other facilities that we should keep an eye on? To be honest, there are 35 facilities that are operated by Olimel. Of course, we are always overseeing everything and reviewing everything in order to improve our operations. However, we do have a priority, which is to take care of the workers who have worked for us for very many years. Some of them have worked for us for their entire careers. I will let my colleague complete. I will reiterate the Vallée Jonction is a very important facility. We have worked with different levels of the government to make sure that workers in Vallée Jonction can have access to other Olimel sites in order to maintain their employment with us. Some of these people have many years of seniority. It is our priority that these employees be able to continue with us or stay in the region. We have mentioned that we will collaborate in order to get open-ended permits. On our other sites, Olimel has done its homework. We want to be able to get the necessary workforce. We have 16 collective agreements that have been reopened in the past year in order to ensure competitiveness with regards to employment. This will allow us to have better results and will allow us to progress with regards to the added value production and to maintain employment in other sites. As my colleague Paul mentioned, you can never say never. Efforts made up to now in our 29 other facilities to hire, retain, and create jobs, well, we have done what is necessary in order to secure that, and that has given us results in other facilities. How much time do I have left? It's 15 seconds. Okay, well, thank you very much for your answers.
Okay, merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Now, on to Mr. McGregor for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of our witnesses. I'd like to echo my colleagues in expressing our collective sorrow at what's happened to the workers at this particular plant. Mr. Beauchamp, I'd like to start with you. I was reading a CTV news article from the middle of April in which both CEO Yannick Gervais and the head of the union, Martin Maurice, were both quoted. I think Mr. Gervais mentioned that this plant had been chosen because, among other things, it needed some serious upgrades, about $40 million in renovations. Now, the head of the union, Martin Maurice, he stated that this plant, in fact, was the most profitable, and he raised questions about the $150 million in public money that Olimel had received 2 years ago to help it become more competitive. So just for our committee's understanding, on the one hand, you have the CEO mentioning that this plant needed about $40 million in renovations. The head of the workers' union said that this plant was most profitable and that your company had received a fairly large sum in public funds. like, was there any internal decision making about how those funds could have been used to upgrade what the head of the union said was the most profitable of your plants?
OK. C'est une question.
This question requires a pretty elaborate response. First of all, the investment amount was studied by our folks. We're talking about $40 million. I'm confirming that. And that is just to maintain our operations. Another operation must be taken into consideration. This is a facility that is old. If you'll allow me, we expanded from the inside, and there are limits to what we can do. We can't necessarily bring in new technology, such as robots. There isn't enough space with regards to square footage in order to invest and update to world-class standards this facility. This facility is one of the most profitable ones at a certain period and allowed us to have the most exports towards Japan for added value items. However, other facilities have now reached that same level as the facility in Vallée-Jonction. We don't have profit centers, but rather cost centers per facility. So if other facilities can make the same products, then it's not a question of profitability. Everybody can be equal, and that was one of the criteria. With regards to the money that the government invested, it was not a sponsorship. It was an investment in the company. The government of Quebec owns a percentage of the company, and there was a list given to the government with regards to our upcoming endeavors. So, for example, technology. But as we mentioned, with the amount of facilities we have and our activities, the amount can seem very big, but it is not for one facility, it is for a company. And you must remember that it is an investment and not a sponsorship.
I just want to get one more question in, and you can add to it if you wish. You know, we have received as a committee data from the government of Canada that, of course, shows 2020 there was a massive surge in pork exports to China, and you have also verified this. It was a result of their home industry being decimated by African swine fever.
Yep.
I guess what I want to understand is how does a company like yours during the good times prepare for the bad times? So we saw a huge surge in 2020. I want to know how did Alimel's profits increase in 2020? And then, of course, there was a fairly catastrophic drop in 2021 and 2022. So how does a company like yours prepare, like when you get a surge in profits in a very good year, and look in the horizon for what may be bad times? Like, do you reinvest that money? Do you maybe look at plants that you foresee as struggling? I just wanted to know how the internal decision making happens in your company during the good times.
Yeah. Vous avez raison de
You're right. There were some very good years. I'd like to remind you that we have 4 different sectors in pork and poultry. The entire company benefits from this. These were not just results that were created by fresh pork. There were, of course, very good results. But as I mentioned earlier, this is an industry that is very volatile with regards to results. Yes, there were some very good years, not necessarily because of fresh pork, but then the bad years was because of fresh pork, because our other 3 sectors had the best results ever. So yes, it hurt. And of course, entrepreneurs were very patient and they knew that it was cyclical. But they knew that there had to be some very drastic decisions to be made to correct the direction and to prevent such negative numbers. And that's why we implemented a program or a plan rather, to try to mitigate things on the medium and long term. It's just an adjustment of our strategy. Thank you very much, Mr. Beauchamp and Mr. McGregor.
Go with 4 minutes for the Conservatives, 4 minutes for the Liberals, 2 minutes for the Bloc and NDP. We'll run just a few minutes over, but we were a few minutes late getting started because of technical difficulties. So right now we have Mr. Steinley, no more than 4 minutes, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Ma question.
Thank you very much. My question is the following. The swine industry is very strong in my riding. It's my cousins, it's my family, it's my friends. Everybody is very worried right now, and they need a lot more than just hope. They need all of the stakeholders and anyone who can work hard to help. Olimel said they needed 200,000 temporary foreign workers. Every delay that can't come to work at Olimel actually expedites the closure of this company. And these are human casualties. We're talking about people losing $50 per hog. $5,000 to $10,000 per week are lost, and Olimel needs these workers in order to be able to sell its meat. Was there a clear signal that this was a crisis in order for Olimel to be able to work? Thank you for the question.
Say, first and foremost, is that currently the processing times for temporary foreign workers overseas to come in is at 24 days right now for overseas. So when there is a need for temporary foreign workers and they apply to come in, that's how long it takes. Now, that is down from about 67 days this past summer, July of 2022. So we have already increased quite dramatically.
Des cas d'immigration, des cas des travailleurs.
The case of temporary foreign workers, we treat those every day and every week. It doesn't take days, it takes months and sometimes years to solve these issues. I am asking the government to go as quickly as possible to give Olimel all of the workers that they possibly can right now immediately. It won't cost much to Canadian society, but it will let Olimel get out of the woods, slaughter its pigs, make sales, and save its farms. We're talking about 1,000 farms in Quebec. The export of pork in Quebec represents more than the exports made by Hydro-Quebec. Have you thought about all of the economies that will falter in rural areas? In maximum 2 months, I want Olimel to get their workers and for you to do your job.
Il reste du temps? Oui. Ma question va être pour le ministère de l'Agriculture.
Do I still have time? A question for the Agricultural Department of Agriculture. Is pork protein something that has an interesting future in the short to medium term? When we look at what's being consumed, even just here in Canada, we see that there is some adjusting, and with plant-based proteins, there is a very good industry, but there are other proteins that are interesting. There are other proteins that are of interest. Mr. Gould, there is only 5 seconds left, so your time is up. I would like to remind members of all of this committee to demonstrate respect to all of our witnesses. I know these questions and these issues are very important to all of our members, but please be respectful. Ms. Valdez, 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to our witnesses who have joined us today. I come from a family of pork farmers, so I do empathize with the impacts that the closing of the Alamel processing plant in Vallée-Jonction will have to the workers and families in particular, and of course the pork industry as a whole. Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll direct my questions to Mr. Boucher. So can you share what steps the department took to address the situation, or can you share if the Agri-Food pilot was leveraged in this case?
I'm not sure that I got the last part of the question, but definitely in terms of AFC's actions, as mentioned during my opening remarks, so the Department of Agriculture and Agri-Food supports the pork industry in many ways, including through our programming on business risk management. We have export development and a market access capability that we know that the pork industry is very much export oriented, with 70% of the meat produced being exported. And looking at a variety of programming through our Canadian Agricultural Partnership and the new version, the Sustainable Canadian Agriculture Partnership, that looks into innovation, that looks into competitiveness issues. But I think, again, this is an issue trying to address or try to improve the competitiveness of the industry as a whole, as opposed to a single issue such as this one.
Thank you. Are you able to share how the special mediator that was assigned facilitated negotiations between the company and its workers?
Thank you very much for the question. I think this was done by the province of Quebec, so to the provincial government. So I would not be able to comment on this. I'm sorry.
No problem. I'll direct my next questions to the Department of Citizenship and Immigration. You mentioned several programs in your opening that are offered by the department. Are there any plans to either expand or modify these programs in light of the closure?
So none that I'm aware of. I think, as you can appreciate, the temporary foreign worker programming in Canada is quite broad. There are a number of pathways, and especially under the temporary foreign worker program, any employer is in short able to apply for and seek authorization to hire temporary foreign workers. Under the International Mobility Program as well, there are a number of pathways for both employers to hire temporary foreign workers under employer-specific work permits, but also for foreign nationals to obtain open work permits. So I think across the whole suite of these programs, it really covers a lot of different pathways already.
Thank you. And I think this question is either for you or Mr. David, but can you share some details on the support services that will be available to workers impacted, whether that's through retraining programs or transitions or transition services at all?
Just to clarify, you're thinking about the temporary foreign workers themselves, or just the workers that are in Vallée-Jonction, the locals?
The locals.
The local, yes. So Service Canada, I know, has been in touch with the company to make sure that we could offer services to the impacted individuals, such as the employment insurance, etc. So I know that there was a first contact that was made.
Merci beaucoup. Okay, maintenant, Mr.
Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Savard-Tremblay for 2 minutes. Well, I would like to start where I left off with Mr. Beauchamp and Mr. Banville earlier. We know that these facilities are getting much older. I imagine that not necessarily for Olymel, but for other facilities or factories and companies, some other facilities might be delocalized or closed. I think that's what was the case. That's the case for the facility that was mentioned today. Do you think that there should be more investments from the federal government for these processing plants? I do think that this is important, not just for the swine industry, but other industries. There are a lot of efforts that are being made. We should be supporting our producers, because if there are no producers, there are no processors, and there are no processors without the producers. So on the long term, The value chain must be taken into consideration and support both the farm and the processor. Mr. Banville, would you like to add something? Is there a need for an investment from the federal government in modernizing these facilities? We can't hear you. I think my colleague Paul answered very well with regards to technological aspects, but I will reiterate that with regards to the efforts Olimel made in order to get local labor force, there were some good results. The foreign workers will always be important, and we have always wanted to work with them long term, whether it be Vallée Jonction or elsewhere. We have always chosen francophone workers in order to facilitate their integration, which worked in both, but we do that across Quebec. We work with a long-term vision. There is support for permanent residency as well. The delays that were mentioned by Mr. Gord are very real, but once these workers get these permanent residencies, well, we help them to try to get those, and we help them with their exchanges with the federal authorities. It's important because these are people in rural areas that maybe have good salaries and pay taxes, buy houses, and become integrated citizens. We have always worked in collaboration with the government, with the workers. Thank you very much. Mr. McGregor, 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Beauchamp, I think you've touched on this in an exchange with other colleagues, but just looking at the plant in question in Vallée Jonction, there's a very significant cluster of primary producers of pork farms in the region. And I guess, they of course now have a timeline to adapt to a plant closure. And I know this plant was taking hogs from as far away as Ontario. It's not all regionally based and locally produced pork. But that being said, I guess, in your conversations with the primary producers, they have to adapt to a significant closure. How does Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, in your view, step in to work with these primary producers when one of your plants closes? Because ultimately, our committee wants to address a letter to the Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. And, they may have to deal with increased transportation costs. Some of them may have to go into other areas of farming because there's a surplus. Can you just expand on that a little bit more?
Je ne voudrais pas...
Well, I wouldn't want to take the government's place. They have strategic choices to make. The pork farmers are going through a crisis and they need support. But with regards to the facilities, if we don't maintain the level of production, then it'll be useless. We are trying to consider Quebec and Ontario, maybe a little bit more Quebec since it's my region. But we have to, we won't be able to adjust our closure date with this help. So they will need this help in order to do so, and they will need that until the implementation of the program. We talked about feed prices with incredible inflation rates. Quebec producers have chosen to support processing plants by accepting a lower prices in order to help them stay on track. So it's not just Olimel, but the entire industry that needs help. Thank you very much. Mr. Steinley? you wanted to clarify something. So very quickly, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And to Mr. Gillespie, you said that there's a 24-day turnaround for emergency temporary foreign worker visas. Are you able to supply the committee with that data just to make sure that it's accurate? Because we've worked on a lot of 80% of our casework in our office is visas and working with IRCC, and 24 days seems pretty much unheard of when we're working on things. So if you could just kind of make sure that's the number and just supply some data with this committee, I'd really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you very much, colleagues. That is the end of the session. Mr. Gillespie, if you would like to provide that to committee, you're welcome to, or any clarification, you can provide that in writing. We are over time, and I would like to thank our witnesses for coming here today to talk about a really important subject. Colleagues, we will suspend just for a few moments to get our next witnesses in, and then we'll get back at it. So stay close by. Et merci beaucoup pour tous les témoins.
Thank you to all of our witnesses.
Au revoir.
Thank you. Goodbye.
I'm looking forward to our witnesses joining us in the room avec le Conseil canadien de porc, René Roy, président.
We have René Roy of the Canadian Pork Council, the chair, and Stephen Heckbert, executive director. We also have Les Éleveurs de Porc du Québec, David Duval, president and pork producer, and Ontario Pork, Eric Schwint, director.
Each group is going to have up to 5 minutes for opening remarks. So, we'll start with the Canadian Pork Council. Monsieur Roy, 5 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Membre du président, Monsieur le Président et membres du comité et autres invités, je m'appelle René Roy. Je suis producteur de porc.
My name is René Roy. I work in Beauce. I am accompanied today by our executive director, Stephen Heckbert. Thank you for inviting us today. It is a very difficult period for the swine industry. My voice is the echo of 7,000 pork producers across Canada and Quebec.
The pork industry in Canada is responsible for almost 1% of our total exports, or almost $5 billion every year. If there is no reversal, the closure of this plant could reduce our pork production in Canada by 12%, and the impact will be outsized in Eastern Canada. I will want you to leave with 3 main points today. The situation is not a local one. It impacts farmers across Canada, and it will have a ripple effect that could impact our ability as a country to produce food for the world. This situation can be an opportunity for us to diversify the processing industry in Canada and to match production with processing capacity. This situation can serve as a reminder that food production is an industry of strategic national importance in Canada, and trade deals must be properly negotiated. Why this is a national concern? Our producers are directly impacted by the closure, and if nothing else is done, the excess supply of animal can have long-term impact on our industry. It's not only Quebec producers who are affected, but also producers from Atlantic Canada and Ontario. And the impact will be felt throughout the country, notably by the price they receive for their animals. To that end, we will be seeking the federal government support to our farmers so they can still be farmers when this temporary turndown has ended. Secondly, we need to be strategic in how we think about our food processing and food production in general. The Canadian pork industry has benefited from the diversity of its players, and we can reverse the trend of market concentration we observe now. Processing capacity are still available, and if we act quickly, we can bring new players in the market. Our industry is willing to work with the government to grasp these opportunities. Third, we need to accept a fundamental truth. Agriculture is an industry of critical strategic importance for Canada. Pork produce in Canada is produced with one of the lightest environmental footprint in the world. We have the opportunity and the responsibility to feed the world with our products. The new Indo-Pacific strategy is a good step, but we need more. We, with our partners in our sector, will be working on national pork strategy in the coming months. But we need a national agriculture policy, particularly in a world undergoing the climate transformation we are witnessing on our farm. We need a commitment to strengthen agriculture and agricultural export. That's why we need a more aggressive stance on trading agreement. Our sector is shut out of market like Europe, where we have trade agreement because we accept non-tariff trade barriers. Nous devons penser stratégiquement à une industrie où le
We need to think of things strategically. Our geographic advantage is clear, and we should be able to bring food to people here and across the world. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Roy.
Thank you, Mr. Roy. Now, Mr. Duval.
Oui, bonjour.
Yes, hello. So, ladies and gentlemen, members of the Standing Committee on Agriculture and Agri-Food, Mr. Chairman of the committee, good morning. Good day, rather. First of all, on behalf of Quebec pork producers, I would like to express my appreciation for this invitation. The announcement of the imminent closure of the Olimel processing plant in Vallée-Jonction will have an impact on many people. Our hearts go out to those who are directly and indirectly affected by this closure. Many commentators have spoken out about the reasons for this closure, criticizing the acquisitions and management of Olimel and the Solio Group. I am not here to do the same, but to explain the impacts of the closure of Vallée-Jonction for the hog breeders. Before speaking specifically about the closure, I would like to mention that hog farming in Quebec represents economic spin-offs of or windfalls of $3.7 billion and direct and indirect employment of 38,000 people. We represent 1,600 hog farms and 2,500 producers, 32% of whom are women and 25% of whom are under the age of 40. In 2016, Olimel and Solio acquired A. Trahan and La Fernandière. By creating a partnership with the Robitaille Group, they acquired Aliments, Lucie Pork, and Viande Donham, and in 2018, Aliments Triomphe and Pinty's in Ontario. Finally, in 2020, Olimel integrated F. Ménard and their 15% market share. On November 8, 2022, La Presse headlined that acquisitions made between 2015 and 2021 increased Solio's long-term debt from $22 million to $1 billion. Let's also remind the committee that Solio is also the biggest player in Quebec in inputs, that grains that are used to feed hogs, and a major player in hog farming as such. I'm the president of the Éleveurs de Porc du Québec, and it is in this capacity that the Competition Bureau of Canada contacted me as part of their review of the merger between Olimel and F. Ménard in 2019. The Competition Bureau did its review of the F. Ménard and Olimel merger and gave its approval, as it did in 2018 with Pinty's and in 2016 with A. Trahan. It may have been relevant to invite the Competition Bureau as to why they gave their approval without any restrictions. I can confirm Olimel was caught in a perfect storm with this geopolitical context with China, with labor issues that have not been resolved yet, with the pandemic and COVID, and among others. What's happening now, we wonder whose responsibility it is, but it is shared between Olimel and the governments. It has surely affected producers, though. Hog breeders are worried and they have paid the cost. There is a huge lack of liquidities, and there's a crying lack of liquidity in Quebec's pork business, and it's time for both levels of government to help us. Right now, for every hog we sell in Quebec, we lose an average of $50 per hog, and that's a lot of money. In 2011, we're thinking of $250 million to $300 million in deficit. It is very, very taxing for our breeders and producers who wake up every morning to feed Canadians and the world. What we would like from the government as well is the following: that we need employees, but it is absurd for me to take. It is absurd that I have the same workers, foreign workers, but I have to start the same process year after year, even though they are the same workers. It seems to me that the government of Canada should be able to simplify things with regards to hiring, retention, and rehiring of temporary foreign workers. I think that the government could also simplify the CFIA accreditation process for the creation of new slaughterhouses. These are all possible solutions for the federal government to help us through this difficult period. The short-term farms need a quick injection of cash. In closing, I thank you for listening, and I will answer your questions to the best of my knowledge.
Beaucoup, Monsieur Deval. Et maintenant, nous avons Monsieur Schwind pour 5 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
My name's Eric Schwint. I'm a pork producer from Waterloo Region in Ontario and a member of the board at Ontario Pork. I appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight to talk about the effect of the closure of Valley Junction will have on Ontario hog producers. Ontario Pork is the voice of the province's pork farmers and a leader in the agriculture industry. Our mission is to foster a vibrant business environment for our producers. Led by our producers, we're committed to sustainable growth in the pork sector, delivering government representation, research investment, and industry improvements in areas including animal care, environmental sustainability, while growing the brand reputation of producers and our product. Our sector represents a farm-to-fork impact in 2022 from 997 producers marketing 5.9 million hogs, was 1.35 billion GDP, 3.78 billion in economic output, and almost 20,000 full-time jobs. Ontario Pork is sought after for its high quality and is exported around the world, with Ontario pork producers being among the world leaders in animal care, food safety, quality, and traceability. In Ontario, we have a competitive advantage, including our land base, an abundant water supply, efficient transportation network, highly skilled labor force, with the knowledge to produce pork in a sustainable and efficient manner. This strong infrastructure will be further enhanced by the opening of a new national research facility in Ontario, which will benefit pork producers in the pork sector across Canada. Processing capacity remains a significant obstacle to our industry's growth. Last year, our sector exported 2.7 million pigs outside of the province. Just 3 years ago, our sector was not experiencing processing plant challenges. COVID-19's impact on the global supply chain and its effect on processors is now further worsened by the olive mill plant closure. This impacts 25,000 market hogs per week that were going to olive mill from Ontario, a 3% loss of markets for our producers. There are also 5,000 Ontario feeder pigs per week that are being displaced. This results in lower prices, longer transport distances, trade issues, economic and environmental impacts. Hog processing capacity. There is no more capacity in Ontario currently. We have to look for markets outside of the province, including Manitoba and the U.S. Transportation. The processing deficit means that animals must be transported further and longer. Higher transport rates, limits on the amount of time an animal can be on a truck before needing feed and water. The environmental impacts. More diesel fuel, greenhouse gas emissions from transporting these longer distances. This means an additional $25 per hog in transport costs to other jurisdictions. For me, I was marketing 10,000 pigs per year to olive mill in the past. That's $250,000 a year net impact if I didn't make changes to my farm operation. We support initiatives that have additional processing capacity located closer to home. Domestic processing allows value add to happen here in Canada, resulting in more jobs and economic activity. Ontario Pork is open to working together with government and industry to bring solutions to these capacity challenges and better balance processing capacity on the short and long term. We want to work with all parties. Despite these processing challenges today, we know there's an increasing worldwide demand for the pork that we produce in Canada. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all our witnesses. We'll now turn to questions from committee members. Now, colleagues, we're only going to have two panels. There won't be an ability to do, two rounds. There won't be an ability to do 3 rounds, just so govern yourselves accordingly. I think I have Ms. Rood, but I'll turn to my conservatives for up to 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, witnesses, very much for being here today on this very, very important topic. This plant closure will impact a lot of Canadians, multiple provinces, especially producers in my home riding of Lambton, Kent, Middlesex, of which I have a large number of hog producers. And they're very concerned about this plant closure. And in 2020, with COVID, we saw a backlog of capacity due to shutdowns, slow production due to COVID and social distancing measures. And producers in Ontario at that time were forced to find alternative processing, such as Alberta, Manitoba, the US. And that's some long distances for live animals to travel, as some of you have mentioned here today. And when I spoke with producers back then, I know that many of them were facing a lot of psychological distress just from having to deal with all of a sudden trying to find somewhere else to send live animals. This isn't like produce, this isn't like grains and oil seeds. These are live animals that have to be sent somewhere to be processed. So I'm just wondering, Mr. Schwint, if you would comment just on what this plant closure, again, further will mean for Ontario producers, and secondly, how will this closure impact capacity potentially for some organic pork producers as well? Because I do understand that I've got some organic folks in my riding, and they were also affected by this plant closure during COVID. And you did allude to having to ship animals farther distances. I'm just wondering also at the same time if you can comment on how having to transfer animals to other provinces, how the new e-logs also will come into place with the transport of live animals to farther distances.
Definitely, this is creating a lot of heartache for producers. We're good at producing pigs. We care about our animals. And marketing them halfway across the country to Manitoba or even Red Deer, it's hard on the animals. And it's hard on the infrastructure. We don't have enough trucks or truck drivers to move that number of animals that far. So pork barn or production system, pigs are produced, they're born every day, they go to market every day, and every time there's a backup in the system, pig welfare could be compromised if markets aren't found. So the result is an economic cost to the farmer because we need that market today. And $25 a hog or $50 per hog, as Mr. Duval spoke of, that's crippling for family farms across Ontario, but across Canada.
Thank you for that. And on that as well, if we lose access to the U.S., what would that do to our pork producers here in Canada, in Ontario especially?
We'd be in a lot of trouble. The U.S. market has been a good market for us for many years. Definitely the last 2 to 3 years as Olymel began reducing their capacity, we've moved more and more hogs south. The Coldwater plant in Michigan has become an excellent customer. We're a valued partner with them today. Without that home, we're talking Manitoba and Red Deer.
Thank you. And we know processing capacity is at a premium for it doesn't matter what animal we're looking at. We definitely need more processing capacity in this country, especially in Ontario, and our producers, they're resilient and they're problem solvers. And they're always looking for ways to solve capacity issues. And I've spoken with some of my constituents directly, actually, who would like to build a new facility, a federally inspected facility here in Ontario. It would create a lot of jobs, 700 jobs. And I'm just wondering if you would comment on what the government could do right now to increase domestic processing for pork production in Ontario.
Definitely marketing pork is a tough business, but there's huge opportunity around the world. Asia loves pork. It's their protein of choice. The government's role is twofold. Mr. Waugh talked about trade agreements and market access. Definitely we need trade agreements, but we also need practical application of those agreements so we can get the pork into the markets. The second major thing is the workforce. Temporary foreign worker programs, pathway to citizenship are all ways to improve competitiveness of our market. Also, we need a partner. So government has a huge role in building that bridge between producers and processing companies to develop a viable business plan to grow our industry.
My final question is, I did mention the e-logs, and we're dealing with live animals, and I'm just wondering if you would comment on what these new e-logs are going to do. Will it put potential animal health at risk? What are some of the impacts that these are going to have on this industry, especially now that we're going to have to try to find different places to send these hogs to?
As an industry, we believe in looking after animals well. So the e-logs are proof that we're doing a good job on transportation. The biggest issue is going to be loading and unloading hogs at Thunder Bay. And the question I would have for government and academia is, how do we improve animal welfare and do the best job of moving animals across the country? Is it unloading and loading? Is it moving trucks, keep them moving instead of pausing?
Thank you. I think I only have about 30 seconds left. I think my colleague has a quick question here for you.
Oui. Alors, pour Monsieur Duval.
For Mr. Duval, you talked about labor issues. Is it the same with regards to producers? Do we need a clearer message towards the immigration department?
C'est très clair.
Yes, it is very clear with regards to labor. I have 7 employees and I've had them for the past 7 years, and every time I have to start this process all over again. It should be far more fluid. I see that there are announcements that they are becoming Canadian citizens. I have 2 employees who want to become citizens, and we have been engaged in a process for 2 years just to start the first step for this process. So it is very long and it's very discouraging. Thank you very much, Mr. Duval and Mr. Leroux. Now, Mr.
For up to 6 minutes, please. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I also want to thank the witnesses, whether they're here virtually or in person. We're here, and we appreciate our witnesses being here because we sympathize with all those affected by this recent news, and we're all concerned about plant closures, whether they happen in Quebec, Ontario, anywhere across Canada. You can see our support here is nonpartisan. In my riding, and Mr. Schwinn, as you know, Conestoga Meats, a farmer-owned co-op model. It's the 2nd largest pork producer in Ontario. And as a cooperative, Conestoga Meat Packers has 160 members, and that's farmers who own shares in the cooperative. Each member has also a shipping share, which represents the right to ship products, which these are factors that help secure a reliable place to ship hogs and also a premium above market pricing for their shipments. So what can you tell us about the benefits of this kind of structuring and what are the challenges? Mr. Schwinn.
Conestoga has been a huge win for the Ontario hog industry for the past 10 years. It's been a 30-year process to get to where it is today, but the current membership, it takes out a lot of volatility. We heard in the previous session, all I know is a victim of volatile markets. By expanding down the value chain, producers are selling pork, not just pigs. So it takes that volatility out. They're able to capture value from the marketplace and be more diversified. So that's been a huge win over the past 8 to 10 years. Duplicating that model would be wonderful as an outside producer. However, I don't know how realistic it is on its own. Marketing pork is a tough business, and to enter a new marketplace, producer co-op would need marketing expertise for pork. And partnerships and working together on that could be a good opportunity to replace some of the Valley Junction production.
Thank you for that. You know, Conestoga Meat Packers recently launched I think it's 120,000 square foot expansion with support from funding from the federal government, which will allow them to increase international shipments. So now they'll be able to sell frozen and fresh cuts to about 30 countries in the world. What's the importance of process facilities innovating, and what are the challenges to do that and stay competitive?
Heard quite a bit this evening about access to labor. So the more innovation, more robotics are involved in the plants, you get better product because there's less contamination. There's more precise cutting, there's less labor required. All that makes a more competitive product on the national stage. Japan sees value in that. They want to buy Ontario pork, Canadian pork because of that. That is the way of the future. It does require scale and large capital investments. And There's a limit to how many of those you can have in any one jurisdiction.
Thank you, Mr. Schwint. Maybe I can turn to Mr. Roy. Recently, I visited the Center for Meat Innovation and Technology, which is located at the University of Guelph. They mentioned there's a 7-to-1 return investment in meat processing. But they also mentioned that there's a lag of investing in technology. They listed some of the challenges for technology. We've heard this from other witnesses today. Space, that innovation such as robotics takes up room. Adoption, we need to encourage adoption of that, and also challenges to find innovative systems that will work for smaller processors and smaller companies. Can you expand on any of those things and how we can help processing plants invest in that technology?
There are two levels of research. Let's talk about research first. There are two levels of research that are important. There is one that we do through our industry with the help of the government through Swine Innovation Pork, and other research that are done at the producer level in various provinces. This helps the adoption of new technology. This is a great partnership that helps a lot for producers. When there is a technology, it's possible to have the technology but not adopted here. It helps also to bring the technology to the reality, the Canadian reality, with the climate, the market situation also. There are various questions that it can help to solve if we have good research. The other part is at the processing level. There are other research that are done that helps to build products that are competitive in the world. Just want to mention that we've been one of the first in the world to produce fresh pork to Japan, and this has been a huge win. Just to mention that it has started in Valley Junction, so all this knowledge has been built there with producers and processors and workers on the floor. That's sad what we see today, what is happening.
That knowledge, that cooperation amongst industry, amongst government, amongst post-secondary and studying. I've heard of some of the added value products, how I guess what I'm getting at is how can we differentiate our products to help us be more competitive on the global scale? What are some of the innovations you're hearing? We've heard, I think today we've heard about food safety, quality, traceability, a skilled labor force, how those can actually make us more competitive, but how can innovation help us set our products apart?
I mean, I will say, Mr. Chair, and thanks for the question. I will say we're an incredibly innovative industry. Farmers, innovate every single day when they, enter into the barn. The challenge really is that we're a bit stuck in terms of innovation we have access to markets that we're not allowed to access because our trading partners have put non-tariff trade barriers in our way. So even if we were more innovative, Great Britain and Europe would find new ways of preventing the sale of our product in those markets. What we really need is we need the Government of Canada to say to those foreign markets, our animal welfare standards are equal to theirs. Our innovation is equal to theirs. Our quality of our product is equal to theirs. We've negotiated trade agreements that we simply can't access those markets. And if we could access those markets, some of the questions around Valley Jonction might in fact not be asked today. We might not be facing this situation if we simply access the market that we are supposed to have access to. So it's really incumbent on us to sort of hold them accountable.
Unfortunately, we're at time. I'd ask you to recognize the chair. I know you were trying to finish. I'd already given you an extra 1 minute. So thank you to Mr. Lewis. Thank you to the witness. Maintenant, Monsieur Savard-Tremblay.
And now, Mr. Savard-Tremblay for 6 minutes. Yes, thank you. Hello, Mr. Duval. I will start with you. We know that there's a lot of stress and people are discouraged. Producers are discouraged. We know that Quebec has committed to giving you a little bit of help. Would you recommend to the government, to the federal government, that they do the same? It's a very good question. Yes, I would make that request. The interpreter must interrupt service.
Là, il y a une fermeture d'usine qui se met en même temps dans une période cyclique où il faut diminuer d'1 million de porcs au Québec. Alors, présentement, on exporte.
Right now, we are exporting that pork across all provinces. We are doing it in disorganized fashion. What we're doing is that we are messing up what's happening in other provinces, and this, of course, is very stressful for all producers. So, inflation. With inflation, it would cost us $500,000 to maintain the facility in Vallée-Jonction per week. There's a lot of stress. A few weeks ago, there were 2 suicides in Beauce, and they were pork hog breeders. We have gone around the region. Producers are ready to go there, but it will be very expensive. We are asking producers who are saying to pay for those who will be leaving. The provincial government committed to helping us. I would like for the federal government to do the same in order to mitigate the cost for the producers who will stay. Usually they are the younger ones who will be staying because they are the ones who invested in recent years in technology and in the animals. And now we can't ask them to leave because they have too much debt, even if they are very high on the performance level. It will be very difficult for them in coming years. Thank you for your recommendation. We will note it. Next question is for Mr. Roy. You are from the Canadian Pork Council. With regards to the closure of the facility and of the plant, transport costs will likely increase for producers. Do you know how much that will cost? Depending on where the meat is or the pork is going from Beauce to another slaughterhouse, it's about 200 kilometers more, 200 to 300 kilometers more from where we are leaving. We have to cross a bridge. We don't have a choice. With regards to value, we're thinking it'll cost us $8 per hog. There is, however, a mechanism that allows us to distribute that cost across Quebec, but it is still the producers who pay that cost. So that cost, how would you have any recommendations as to who should take on that cost? There are many recommendations right now across Quebec. Olimel represents 80% of slaughters. This is a difficult period in our cycle. After a dip, there is always an increase in price and in the situation. So we are actively looking for potential investors in order for us to be able to diversify this offer and the demand so that there is better diversity and so that there could be better revenue on the long term, since there would be a better competitiveness on the market. How much time, Mr. Chair? Two minutes. Great, we still have time. My question is to les éleveurs de porc to Ontario Pork. Olimel is in Beauce. How is the swine industry in Ontario affected? Please explain to us the chain.
All started reducing their production a couple of years ago. We were shipping approximately 25,000 market hogs per week to LMO. As the cutbacks happened, it tended to be the Ontario hogs would be cut back first or in conjunction with Quebec hogs. And that would force Ontario hogs west or south to alternative markets, increasing transport costs and generally meaning less returns for those hogs.
Donc là, maintenant, ça vous enlève cette possibilité.
So this removes that possibility right now, but is the capacity for slaughter in Ontario sufficient?
We are short at least 25,000 processing spaces per week for Ontario's production, and you could argue that that could be 30 or 35,000 hogs per week. There's definitely room for another large process in the Ontario market, exporting Canadian pork and Quebec pork around the world. Ontario pork and Quebec pork, I think we're aligned. We would love to have a processing plant anywhere in Eastern Canada. So we think there's an opportunity there.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Savard-Tremblay.
Thank you, Mr. Savard-Tremblay. Now, finally, Mr. McGregor for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. You know, one thing that's struck me with a lot of the testimony that our committee has heard during this meeting is I'm getting this sense of deja vu because, you know, one of the first studies that our committee embarked on was the study of processing capacity, and we're now seeing consequences bear out in real time with the Olymel plant closure. Mr. Schwint, I was paying attention to your opening remarks, and when you said that processing capacity, or I guess the lack thereof, remains the biggest obstacle to your growth, and we compare that with Olymel's presentation to this committee, you know, listing all of the challenges that company is facing and the reasons why they've had to close. It's quite an incredible juxtaposition for our committee to grapple with, where you're saying you need more capacity to realize growth, and they're listing all of the different challenges that they're experiencing. You know, during our committee's study into this, you know, one of our recommendations was that, you know, the Government of Canada, in collaboration with the provinces and territories and the private sector, identify some strategic funding opportunities to address that regional processing capacity, all in an effort to strengthen our agri-food supply chain. You know, we're only doing one meeting on this closure. We ultimately want to have this meeting inform a letter that we're going to authorize our chair to send to the minister. So I know you've touched on a few points, but is there anything else you would like to add that you'd really like to see in this letter? And can you draw from some of the experiences that our committee's had, the recommendations we've made previously? Anything else you wanted to add to this?
I think our three key points are labor, market access, and we've got a competitive environment to produce pork in this country, if we can get those two things.
Okay, thank you. That's good. I think that's something that we've heard a lot of. Maybe I'll turn to the Canadian Pork Council. I was also listening to, you know, the overview of, you know, how we need to be, you know, quite strategic. You had mentioned the Indo-Pacific strategy, and in fact, our committee is about to embark on a study on the Indo-Pacific region, vis-a-vis, like specifically related to our agricultural exports. You know, we have seen what's happened to your sector, you know, with China, with our exports reaching quite stratospheric heights in 2020 because of their own internal issues. But then, of course, there was quite a catastrophic drop-off in 2021 and 2022. And so as our committee embarks on this study, is there anything you want to add that we should be keeping in mind when we're looking at the witnesses to select, the kinds of questions to ask, and so on, just as a precursor to when we finally get into that study?
I would like to mention the fact that non-tariff trade barriers could be a shadow that impacts really hardly our trade ability. Even if we have a trade agreement, if we have non-tariff trade barriers in place, such as we have right now with Europe, it means that we are not able to trade, even if we have a trade agreement. There are also some political statements that could have impact. We've seen it with China. It has impacted our industry quite hardly. So this is also to be taken into consideration because we are partnering with various countries in the world, and it has to be considered. Political statements, has been hard on our industry, and I think it's important that everybody take this into consideration as it is made, because we have been a collateral victim of it. You're supposed to.
I would just add to that, Mr. Chair, and I will try to pay attention to you in case I get cut off this time. I would add that in terms of the Indo-Pacific strategy, those are some big markets for potential pork products. So Philippines is an enormous area of growth opportunity for us. South Korea, there are very many markets there. So as we look to expanding our trade in those markets, again, it's about helping us access those markets, but keeping that access as well once we've begun to keep it or once we've begun to access it. So it's about gaining the access and then keeping the access. So it's really the question we would ask for government is not just open an office or not just open, but make a long-term strategic commitment to that office. So, this is a part of the world that makes decisions in 20-year timeframes, not in 5-year timeframes.
Thank you. And Mr. Chair, I'll donate the remaining time back to the committee.
You'll make my Christmas card list this year for that. Thank you, Mr. McGregor. Colleagues, we've got, we're pretty much at time, but I do want to get a second round in. I'm going to do what I did last time, which is 4 minutes for the Conservatives, 4 for the Liberals, 2 for the Bloc, and 2 for the NDP. So, je pense maintenant c'est Monsieur Lehoux or Monsieur Gourde. 4 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Now, Mr. Lehoux or Mr. Gould for 4 minutes. Question for Mr. Roy. We talked about certain difficulties with regards to the slaughters in Ontario. The concentration of slaughter in Canada brings up the issues that we're having now. Is the CFIA playing a part in these difficulties? Of course, the regulation side of things does make things more difficult. Of course, when there is some grouping or interest for acquisitions, as Mr. Duval brought up, it is something to consider. Food is not like anything else. It is strategic. We need it as a society, but we also export it. So we have to have a much more strategic view of it than some other type of commercial or industrial good. You lead me to my next question. You are working with something that is living. It's not like any other plant where you just turn a key and things just start to work. We understand that since this plant is closing, we reasonably can't expect for it to open up again very soon. I understand that you are working on opening up new markets and maybe diversify them. I'd like to know more about your thoughts with regards to the capacity of diversification of exports and the barriers. How can we tell other countries not to put those tariff barriers? Let's talk about tariff barriers. If they can use them, then we can use them. It is just a return to sender type of thing, these non-tariff barriers. I'm not saying that we should make a habit out of it, but there are some signals that should be sent to partners that should be better players, for example, Europe. With regards to the agreements that have already been signed, you have already had this kind of experience? Yes, with regards to Europe. We saw recently the UK do the same. We're observing this exchange. We're not satisfied because we won't have access to it. But is the Canada Pork Council able to develop markets elsewhere? I'd like you to maybe explain what is happening with regards to the distress in your communities. Some suicide was mentioned earlier. With regards to foreign markets, there is an organization called Canada Pork that does the promotion to foreign countries. And as representatives, we do this work with the Department of Agriculture. Of course, we should not be putting all our eggs in the same basket. In this case, it's all the bacon in the same basket. We do need to diversify. With regards to mental anguish and distress, it is very real. We were talking about suicide, but there is a lot of uncertainty. There are people who will not take the flame that's the torch that's been passed to them. There are people who have not been able to catch up after 6 months in business. It is very dramatic. Thank you, Mr. Roy and Mr. Lehoux. Now, Mr. Drouin for 4 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses. The points that Mr. McGregor talked about and those that came up here are very important. We're talking about the transformation, and you're talking about diversifying the market, and I understand that. But if we can't process, we don't have the capacity for processing, how do we take advantage of those markets? We do know that we have a need for processing, but I'm asking the question, do we have to go towards, should we go for more markets if we don't have the capacity for processing and for growth in that sector? Diversifying markets could also be just a different type of product. So there are various ways of diversifying a market. We did it with pork in Japan. There are other ways to diversify a market. For example, going through processing and the second stage of processing. If there is quality research and we can develop interesting products for the domestic market or the international market, then we will go towards markets that are unoccupied, and that is a diversification that we are very capable of doing. Can you speak of the relationship between the producer associations and processors? Mr. Schwint mentioned something. You talked about a joint plan in Quebec. Is that a plan that seems to be working? Mr. Duval can also intervene here. But I'd just like to know, because it surprised me when he said that maybe a government intervention is required in order to aid and facilitate that conversation. I'd like to hear your thoughts. I can start. Very briefly, we need to work all together. We already work together with the Meat Council. We have various challenges that we can only face if we work together. When it's time to negotiate, there are provincial organizations that do those negotiations, especially in Quebec. I'll let Mr. Duval speak to that. And with regards to Ontario, I'll allow Mr. Schwint to speak to that. Mr. Duval, in 30 seconds, because I'd like to ask some questions to Ontario. Very quickly, the joint plan, what does it look like? Well, it's unique in Canada and even in America. It allows us to have human-scale farms and have families that work on them and that can pass the torch. And it's a very big it has very big negotiating power. There was a processor who had a monopoly in Quebec, and when he closed, there was no way of negotiating. But before that, it was much easier.
You've used your words. You said maybe government help to facilitate some discussions between producers and processing sector. I know in Quebec they've got, and I'm sure you're aware, they've got this plan that they've put in place, legislation that they've put in place for the Quebec government. Is that something that you're asking for in Ontario, or
arrangement like that? No. What I'm talking about is another Conestoga, like Mr. Lewis talked about. There's a group in Ontario called NextGen, a group of producers that want to come together, invest in processing. They see the need, but they also understand they don't have the expertise in marketing the pork. So can we bring experts or companies that are good at marketing pork together with producers who have the pork to guarantee that supply, come together and make a venture of some sort? That's where I see government having a role in facilitating those conversations, because they are hard conversations.
They are, and I'd be looking forward to talk about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Drouin. Thank you, Mr. Schwint. Finalement, Monsieur Savard-Tremblay.
To finish? Mr. Savard-Tremblay for 2 minutes. Yes, Mr. Duval and Mr. Roy, very quickly. Do you think that we should aim for a model of small local regional slaughterhouses that would be decentralized, maybe even mobile slaughterhouses? We have very little time, just throwing that out there. I'd say that all models, so long as they provide some sort of wealth across Quebec, are good. This is not big slaughterhouses are not a unique model. It's the same in the Maritimes. They're also very stressed. They have the capacity to process their meat. They'd be very interested. It's a question of competency and skill sets. We just need to go get the resources to help us. I am not closed off to any of these ideas. Diversity is where we can help our industry. A small slaughterhouse could be helpful. Yes, it is an opportunity. And the opportunity we have today with the Canadian government is to find help with processing and to help producers to go across this, to traverse this crisis. Thank you, Mr. Savard-Tremblay, and thank you to all of our witnesses tonight. We know that this is a very difficult topic for all pork producers.
That ends our second panel. Thank you so much for taking the time today. Thank you again to our witnesses. There was some conversation of going in camera to have a conversation of what will be in the letter. Given the time constraints right now on our translators, we are going to be meeting on Wednesday where we intend to go in camera to study food price inflation. I'm going to make the decision as your chair that that will be the time that we will reevaluate. That will also give us some time as members to contemplate what we've heard here today and how we might craft that letter accordingly. So unless there's anything else, I'm going to say meeting adjourned and good night to you all. Thank you.